Hey guys, I'm here. I hope you all are doing well. I hope everybody's taking care of themselves. There's a point that I want to make in this lecture, and I can't find a YouTube anywhere that makes the same point, so I'm going to be selfish and make you listen to me talk about it instead. We're going to talk about American innovation in the mid 1800s, and I'm going to make one of those statements where at the beginning of the lecture I'm going to say it, and at the end of the lecture, maybe you'll agree with me and maybe you won't, but it's one of those statements that nobody wants to hear, and that is that Americans don't really invent that much. And the things that they invent, they really aren't things that Americans invented. Most of the big inventions of the mid 1800s that changed the face of America were actually borrowed from other countries. So we're going to go through some of those and see, first of all, how they came into America, but also how they changed things for Americans. Let's start with the factory system. The system of manufacturing things in a factory, of putting a whole bunch of workers together in one building and having them all work on these huge machines that all do the same job as little machines used to do in people's living rooms. That system was brought over to America by a British guy named Samuel Slater. Samuel Slater had worked in textile mills in Britain ever since he was 10 years old. He was a child of the British factory system, and he heard conversations back and forth with American industrialists and American traders, and got the impression, even as a young child, that Americans sure did want this technology. But it was against the law to teach Americans how to have a textile mill, how to use these machines and how to build them. But Samuel Slater decided that if it was against the law to document it and bring it over, he would just memorize it and bring it over. So Samuel Slater spent all of his youth in textile mills and then came over to America, and having memorized everything that made them work, he gave that technology to Americans. He was called the father of the American factory system by President Andrew Jackson. He's called Slater the Trader by the British. The Industrial Revolution actually started in Great Britain, so it had really taken off quite a bit by the time it hit America. It drew people in from the countryside and into the cities, and it caused great big factories to go up, and then it caused Britain to be better equipped to trade with Europe. Then when it hit America, the American Industrial Revolution came really closely on its tails and made a lot of the same advancements. But it was within the British Empire that most technology already existed. One of the most famous inventions you've probably heard of is the cotton gin by Eli Whitney. Well, the cotton gin wasn't actually invented by Eli Whitney. The one that is used in the American South was invented by Eli Whitney, but the idea of a cotton milling machine, it's gin, which is short for engine, and a cotton milling machine was actually invented in India. Eli Whitney took the machine that they used in India, which was good for long staple cotton. But long staple cotton didn't grow in the southern United States. Short staple cotton did. So this machine that they use in India didn't really work that well in America. Eli Whitney took that machine and reworked it so that it would work on short staple cotton, which is what America grew. And once the American short staple cotton was able to be put through this machine instead of pulled apart by hand, because processing cotton is a really messy, time-consuming job. Once it was possible to gin a whole bunch of cotton all at once, the increase in slavery in the American South, it really went through the roof. You would have thought that a machine that made a time-consuming job take less time would also cut down on the number of people needed to do it. But what actually happened was that because you could process more cotton, plantation owners bought more land and planted more cotton, and therefore needed more slaves to pick cotton. So actually the cotton gin made slavery in the American South explode right around the same time that that the international slave trade was supposed to be decreasing. Eli Whitney was responsible for another major insight, and that was the interchangeable parts. He wasn't the one who invented it. He was the person who saw that factories could be put to use doing it. So Eli Whitney invented a process by which you could make all of the parts for a rifle the same, and therefore if a part of your rifle broke, you could replace just that part instead of the way that they had it before. This doesn't actually come into play really until the Civil War, but it's something that he is pretty famous for borrowing from the factory system in Britain and bringing to America. Robert Fulton took something that was built in France, which was an engine that ran on steam, and used it to create a boat that would move up the Hudson River. At the moment, the Hudson River is a pretty strong tide. It flows pretty strong, so you really only travel one direction on the Hudson River, and then you travel back by land. You could travel up the other way, but it required a lot of manpower to get up the Hudson River instead of down it. He decided to use this steam engine and couple it with a paddle that went under the water and paddled the water so that the boat could be pushed up the river. Now that seems like a well, duh kind of thing to us, but it hadn't really made a big impact on the world, because there aren't a lot of places where you're moving up and down a river in European society where you can't move up and down the river. If you can only move one direction in the river, there's probably 3 countries on that river. So cooperation, not a big deal. America was all one great big, continental area though. So rivers connected a lot of different regions in the same country. The biggest place where this was an issue was the Mississippi. The Mississippi current is so strong that there really literally was no way to move a ship the wrong way, or even a boat the wrong way up the Mississippi. However, you could float a log all the way down the Mississippi without ever worrying about it bumping into anything. But once it got down to New Orleans, that was it. That was as far as you went. So you could make a raft and float it down the Mississippi, and the Mississippi would carry it all the way to New Orleans. But you're hiking back. You're having to, take a wagon back. Fulton's invention of the steam engine made it possible for ships to travel up the Mississippi, north of the Mississippi, instead of just south, which quadrupled trade to and from the Mississippi River Valley out of New Orleans. Communications were also something where people were making great big strides in communications. The original wire by signal technology was invented in Britain, but Samuel Morse used this network of wires and dials and things. And I mean, you can see this on your screen, how complicated it was, that you had to move one little dial would move one little letter, and it was incredibly complicated. Samuel Morse invented a click code, so that instead of watching a pin move, you would just hear a sound, and sound could travel further and through more mediums. So Samuel Morse took a technology in Britain and made it American. In Britain is this is a picture of the click technology that he used, and it allowed for the signal to travel, as you'll see, also underwater, which was a big deal in America, and allowed communication with Britain, actually. Railroads were something that were laid out in the British countryside. They were just wagons pulled by horses, but they were pulled in a straight line by those horses, which was cool. But using the steam engine that was developed by a mine worker, George Stephenson, in England, they managed to put an engine on these railroads to push them by themselves so that they didn't require horses anymore. And then those railways stretched all over Liverpool and Manchester and all over the place. And they coupled that with steam technology and made passenger railways that could carry passengers as well as coal. In the 1800s in America, entrepreneurs began to send railways across land, specifically so that goods could be shipped from farms into cities. So the technology started in Britain, and it ended up in transforming America. Now, if I was in a classroom right now, I'd definitely be pointing this out to you. Most of these railways go to the Ohio River Valley, which connects this waterway with the Atlantic Ocean. But it also connects to the Mississippi River, which is down here. So it is now possible to travel, to bring something into the Gulf of Mexico, deposit it in New Orleans, paddle it up the Mississippi River into the Ohio River Valley, and then use a railway to take it to the ports here and take those over to Europe. Those are the transformative things that Americans put in place using technology that came from outside of America. So Americans don't didn't really invent that many things during this era. And actually, even to this day, most of the big things that you use that are great big American, successes weren't invented by Americans. They were improved by Americans. They were invented by others. That's just kind of a thing that we do. It's kind of like we don't always win our own wars, but we like to think we do. We don't always invent the things that transform our world. We just like to think that we do. And what we really do is take inventions that other people have come up with and make them American and make them apply to America and make them good American useful things. So I'm going to post this PowerPoint and I'm going to post my notes, and I expect you to review them at your leisure. Bye.